Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's town hall. Michael Schlein, Director of the Charities and Legal Services Division. Today we're going to talk about the registration requirements for charitable organizations. So what would a charitable organization need to file with the Secretary of State? Why would they need to file with us? And talk also a little bit about when that needs to happen and how that can be done today. So just to cover some basics here on the town hall, please mute yourself. That way we don't get any feedback or background from anybody. If you'd like to keep your camera on, please do. Love always to see those hopefully smiling faces. We're going to talk about this matter, and today's town hall is for informational purposes only. It's not intended to be legal advice. And repeat that, it is not intended to be legal advice, informational purposes only. And with me today, I have charity officers that'll be monitoring the chat box. If anybody's ever used the Google Meet before, there's or really most of these virtual video conferencing type of tools, there's a chat feature where you can type in questions that you may have into the chat box. One of our charity officers will try to answer those for you. You may find that your question gets answered during today's presentation. Hopefully this covers a lot of territory and questions you may have. If you have questions about a specific organization that you're working on behalf of, a lot of times folks like to ask for a very specific question about the registration needs of a specific organization. In that case, I'd encourage you to contact the charity division offline. The email address will come up later here towards the end with our contact information, but the letters D like David, L like Larry, the word charity, DL charity _ SOS like Secretary of State at maryland.gov, DL charity _ SOS at maryland.gov. Please email the charity division about anything very specific to your organization and its registration needs. If it's not current, reach out to us there. We'll work with you through there to get you back into compliance, hopefully. And then at the end, we'll hold some time here for question and answer. Anybody wants to raise their hand, so to speak, and ask a question at the end, we'll save a few minutes to do that. We'll try to be respectful of everybody's time here. This says 2 to 3 o'clock, so we're going to go through the presentation and should have everybody wrapped up here, including Q&A, within about an hour. So without further ado, we're going to get started here. The law that we regulate here at the Secretary of State's office is called the short title for the law is the Maryland Solicitation.
You're on mute, Mike.
Well, that's always fun when that happens out of the blue. Thanks, Steph.
Sure.
Maryland Solicitations Act, Business Regulation, Article Title 6, Annotated Code of Maryland, and the Code of Maryland Regulations, Title 1, Subtitle 2, Chapter 4, or where the law and the regulations are found. And there's a place if you wanted to buy a copy of the book. There's a link. I know it says notary, but it'll take you to the link to buy any of the handbooks that we have here. And in particular, if you wanted to purchase a Maryland Solicitations Act book, you can do it from there. The law is available online for free as well. If you want to kind of click through each section individually, this just kind of puts it in a book format. If you want to have a book to hold in hand rather than scrolling through pages online. So getting started here, I think the biggest question is, does the organization have to register? So if so, when? It's one of 3 reasons an organization may have to register with the Secretary of State's office, with the Charities and Legal Services Division. And they all have to do with soliciting charitable contributions in Maryland or from those inside of Maryland. If the organization's not soliciting charitable contributions, then there's not a need for it to register. And so 3 reasons why you would need to get become registered and get a certificate of registration or registration letter from us is that you're soliciting charitable contributions in Maryland. So located in Maryland, you solicit contributions here. You have contributions solicited on your behalf in Maryland. So maybe you're located here, maybe you're not, but somebody's raising money on your behalf in Maryland or from Marylanders. Or if you're soliciting outside of the state of Maryland, but you're located in Maryland. So if your organization's in Maryland and you solicit anywhere, you need to be registered. So the short answer is, if you're soliciting from Marylanders, whether you're in Maryland or not, if someone's soliciting from Marylanders on your behalf, or if you're located in Maryland, but you're soliciting really anywhere, you would have to register with our office. An important distinction, a lot of folks don't think of it this way, but if you're a charity based in Maryland and you have a website and you have a donate button, that is soliciting charitable contributions. That is soliciting them inside of Maryland because you're located here. And sorry about that. And so if you have that donate button and you're located in Maryland, you need to register because you're soliciting charitable contributions. And again, we're talking about soliciting charitable contributions. We're going to talk about what is charitable here in a second. But the organization would need to register if it's soliciting charitable contributions in Maryland, or if you're located anywhere but soliciting Marylanders. So charitable contribution, one that'll be used on a charitable purpose. So what's a charitable purpose? Humane, philanthropic, patriotic, eleemosynary, which is really just a really long, funny sounding word for charitable. So we're raising money for some type of charitable public benefit for the public good. That's charitable. So if you're raising money for that purpose, you would need to register if you're doing so in Maryland or from Marylanders. What's a charitable contribution? Really any contribution made on a representation, it will be used for a charitable purpose. Could include many things. You even see the word payment here, transfer, it's some type of enforceable pledge, or really just any pledge somebody decides they're going to give to you and they do give to you. That contribution could include money, credit, property, or services. One of the other questions we frequently get asked is, I get donations of stuff. I get food donations or clothing donations or pet food or whatever stuff, property you can imagine. That is a contribution. And if you're soliciting charitable contributions, including not just money, but stuff, you would have to register. And charitable contributions, they do not include an unsolicited gift. They do not include a government grant or government money. They do not include membership assessments, dues or fines. They do not include payment for property sold or services rendered, unless that property is sold or the services rendered in connection with a charitable solicitation, and also a public safety contribution as it's defined in the Maryland Solicitations Act. I'm not going to go too far down that road, but think volunteer fire company raising money for the firehouse, maintenance, trucks, equipment, training, people, things of that nature. That's a public safety organization. Think police and fire, for the purpose of helping that police department or its officers, or the union or its members, and fire department and its members. That's public safety. If you're a public safety organization soliciting public safety contributions, only public safety contributions, then you wouldn't have to file with us. So what's a charitable solicitation? Who could have ever dreamed that solicitation, you think of charitable solicitation, you usually think of your traditional phone call or letter asking for donations, but it means so much more than that when we're talking about the Maryland Solicitations Act and the requirement of a charity to register. So it's an oral or written request regardless of whether the person who makes the request receives the charitable contribution. If you ask, it's a solicitation, whether you receive the contribution or not. If you're going to solicit charitable contributions, the organization needs to be registered with the Secretary of State's office before doing so. What else? What does the solicitation include? Many, many things. I will not read every word here. This is really straight out of the law on what is a charitable solicitation. But it includes things you commonly think of: fundraising, drive, event, campaign, or other activity. So some announcement to the media asking for contributions, advertisement where you're directly or indirectly seeking contributions. And so, everybody thinks, okay, yeah, I asked somebody for a donation. I sent them a letter. I made a phone call. I texted them. I emailed them. I got a donate button on my website. I put it on other social media. It's in writing, whether on paper or online. It's in writing somewhere asking for a donation or some type of support to the organization. But the last one that folks often don't think about is fundraising events. And this is really this last main bullet point, and the subpoints are there to tackle fundraising events. Think of, we're in Maryland, so let's just say your charity holds a crab feast. That attempt or offer to sell an admission to that crab feast is a solicitation. Even though you may not be able to write off that the buyer may not be able to write off that ticket purchase as a donation because they bought a ticket, and that's IRS stuff. That's not state of Maryland stuff. And consult your own tax professional for advice on that. I'm going to throw out that disclaimer there. But they bought a ticket to a fundraising event. That's still a solicitation that would require you to register under the Solicitations Act, because they're attending your fundraising event to support your organization, right? If I wanted to, or bull roast to say, per se, whatever it is that you're having as a fundraising event, I came to your fundraising event and I paid for that ticket and I attended to support the organization. So I'm coming there with the understanding that I'm supporting the organization and its mission. If I just wanted to get a barbecue or something somewhere, I could get that from any other restaurant. But I'm coming to your fundraising event to support you, the charitable organization, and your mission. So even an attempt to sell that admission or advertisement or coupon, chance, device, and all these other things, ticket, the attempt to sell those is a solicitation that would require the organization to register with the Secretary of State's office, because you're soliciting for a charitable purpose in Maryland. You're soliciting charitable contributions. Again, don't confuse what you traditionally think of as a contribution in the way many of us know, where I donate money and I can write it off. Not to be confused with what we're talking about here, which is soliciting charitable contributions as defined under the Solicitations Act for the purpose of whether or not the organization has to register. Similar but different. And this is one key part there on how they're different, right? Fundraising events, that's a solicitation. They're buying a ticket from you maybe, or they're buying a raffle ticket or whatnot, but they're doing it because it's supporting your organization. That makes it a charitable solicitation, and that makes the organization have to register to do that. And oh, by the way, the fundraising revenue from these fundraising events all count towards the threshold when we're talking about charitable contributions. So not just your donations, but your revenue from these fundraising events. And gross revenue, I might add, not your net revenue. We're going to talk about contributions later and the registration thresholds. But when we're talking about over or under 25,000, we're talking about audit review thresholds and registration fee thresholds later on. Keep in mind that it's not just the donations, it's the revenue from your fundraising events. Whether it's a fundraising event like a bull roast or a crab feast, or a fundraising event like you're holding a raffle and you're trying to get people to buy raffle tickets because there's an understanding, obviously, that that purchase is going to help the organization in some way. So whether that appeal is made expressly or implicitly to induce the purchase, it's a charitable solicitation. So now we're going to talk about what we talked about, I guess, when you'd have to register, what's a contribution, what's a solicitation. And now we're going to talk about what is needed. What do I do? Before we go too far down the road of listing out what is due when you file, just a couple plugs here for the online filing system. Went live August 15th, 2022. You don't have to file on paper anymore. I say that if you've already sent us paper, don't panic. We're going to process it and respond. But go file online. We're going to talk about a lot of the requirements here, the way the online filing system is built. It's built to ask for what you need. And you answer questions in the order in which they're asked, and it's going to know, based on those answers, what it should ask for and what comes next. It's going to ask you to attach everything. One of the biggest problems we have in the paper filing world, and that we had in the paper filing world, is the kind of the guess and test, right? You just send what you find and what you hope and what you think, and maybe it's good and maybe it's not. You find out later, and we contact you, and hopefully you get that contact and you answer it. And sometimes people do, sometimes people don't, but the online system takes a lot of that guesswork out, and it takes a lot of we get a lot less incomplete filings for folks that file online. A lot less. It's not perfect. People designed it, people use it, so it'll never be perfect. But the quality of online filing is significantly higher than the paper apps because it's designed to capture everything that's needed based on certain data. And communications, including renewal reminders and compliance letters, are now coming through the new registration system. I guess not so new, it's about 1.5 years old. That stuff's all being sent by email now. If anybody's ever talked to us about the fact that they're missing an email address on their annual registration form that they sent in by paper, we're demanding it. Well, this is why. And it's been mandatory to give us an email address for several years now. But an email address is required on all this stuff, and that's because all the contact is coming through email now, not the old-fashioned letter. There will be some times where letters might get sent, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the regular day-to-day communication, renewal reminders, you send something that's incomplete, the initial contact, and most of that correspondence now is sent by email. And so make sure we have a good email address that somebody's going to read. Folks will sometimes, and I'm not going to hammer this point too hard, other than to just give us an email that's going to be used. Folks go, well, I don't have organization doesn't have its own specific email address. Doesn't, just give us an email address that we're going to be able to reach you at for the purpose of conducting business of that organization. And if you want to create a generic organizational email address, you could pop on Gmail, Yahoo, whatever. I'm not making recommendations on which one to use, but 5-10 minutes, you got an email address created that the organization can use if you don't want to use your own individual one. And if your organization's already registered and you're using the online system, even if you're using it for the first time, don't submit a new registration. There's a process called claiming your record. It basically allows the designated record holder to claim the organization's records and file online. And if the organization owes annual registrations from a prior year, it's possible we may ask you to send something outside of the online system by paper, by email, or if it's a check by mail. Really, when we're doing that, we're trying to avoid a scenario in which you may, if you were to go back online and do something that you did partially before, we're trying to avoid these double payment scenarios. And talking about claiming the record here and really accessing One Stop, there's a way to do that. And it's the email address of record for the organization. So whatever email address you've been giving us on your registration forms for the last several years, that's the email address of record that you need to log into One Stop with to, quote unquote, claim the record through this process to get access to your records and file online. So that email address of record, that's the one you want to use to create your One Stop account. And if we should be using a different email address for your email address of record, reach out, let us know right there, DL charity_SOS@maryland.gov, and let us know that it's a different email address so that we can change it on our end so you can access your stuff. I bet you the number one reason folks get lost or frustrated and struggle in the record claiming process, they go set up their entity account and all very well, but in doing that, they try to do it with an email address that the system doesn't recognize. And you know, if I'm Michael.Schlein at Maryland.gov, I can't log in with DL charity _SOS and claim my record because the system doesn't know that DL charity _SOS is run by the same person that has that individual email address. Make sure you're using the email address of record, and that'll get you through the record claiming process a lot easier. And again, if we need to change it, let us know so that you can claim the record under whatever email address you want to use for the purpose of filing online. There's a video guide and a user guide. The video guide walks you step by step. You kind of, if you're a visual learner, you can watch the video to see what it is that's going on. Folks go through the record claiming process and they get to claim the record. They see there's nothing to claim. 99.9% of the time is because the email address they're logged into One Stop with is not the email address of record. So One Stop doesn't know that that person is allowed to claim that record because they logged in and created an account using an email address that is not the email address of record. And use the charity registration user guide on the charity homepage right there on that link as well. Really walks you through step by step. So if you can get the record claimed using the user guide to claim it or watching the video, and it's time to file an annual registration, that annual registration user guide there helps you navigate the system, helps you go through it step by step. You know, if you get lost, take a look at that user guide. Try not to get frustrated. I know it's easy for me to say that, but if you get through step by step, just kind of follow through those instructions, it'll get you in the right place. There's an extra click or two that might throw you off, and those user guides are there to try to help you avoid kind of running out of order or running afoul of the system. And it can get frustrating. I think we've all had a system that we've used that just drove us crazy. Many folks tell me how easy it is to get in and navigate and file online, and we have other folks that tell me the opposite. So, you know, but those user guides are there, use them, but really make sure that the email address you log into to create your One Stop account and claim the record is actually the email address of record. You know, saying that a lot because, as you can imagine, we get that a lot. And I've been on the phone with people who are like, I can't find the record to claim and file online. The system, it doesn't work. It's, you know, what a piece of junk. And, you know, well, you're logged in as info@ABC Charity. Of course I am. Or, you know, log out, let me see it. And they're logged in with a completely different email address. You know, you just get in the habit of doing it, and you're not even, you don't always remember some days. Life is busy, life is crazy. Make sure you're using the email address of record. And I realize that sounds nuts maybe, or to some folks that I'm saying that so much, but it's because it happens so much that's the reason people can't find their stuff. You can also authorize other individuals. So if you are the record holder and you claim the record, you can actually authorize other people to have access to that record. You want your whole board to get in there. You're the president. You want your treasurer and secretary and vice president or whoever to have access to it. You can do that. There's a way to do that. The user guide can help with designating that. The other thing to think about when you're using this form, and I mentioned a little earlier, it's really built to ask you for exactly what is needed based on your answers to the questions. There's a series of 4 questions up front. As long as you answer the correct way and plug in the correct numbers, it's going to ask you for the correct stuff. And it usually leads with asking if you file a 990 or 990 EZ or 990 PF, 990N, or none of the above. As long as you select the right one, and a lot of folks select 990 EZ when they're actually a 990N filer. They go, oh, this is the EZ form, it must be the EZ. 990 EZ is different from 990N. 990N is that little e-postcard you file with the IRS. So make sure you're selecting the right one. Based on what you answer there, it's going to ask you to punch in certain data if you file a 990, 990 EZ, or 990 PF. from that 990, it's going to ask you to enter numbers from certain lines of your 990 and make sure you answer the right amounts or answer the right numbers. And as long as you look at the page number and the line number for the question on the online form and plug in the corresponding number from your 990, you'll get to the right spot. And then it asks you about requesting an exemption from registration. We're going to talk about why you could be exempt here later. A lot of people just check yes because they think we're talking about being a federal income tax exempt 501c3. That's not what we're asking. We're asking about exemption under the Maryland Solicitations Act. And more oftentimes than not, the answer is no. And again, we'll talk about when the answer might be yes later. And then also whether or not you have a professional solicitor, which is different than a fundraising counsel. Talk about that a tad later on too. We're not going to go too in depth on that. But if you have one, you know which one they are. And then after those 4 questions are answered and you plug in the info, it's going to navigate you through the right path. It's going to tell you what you owe in terms of money for registration fee, if you owe a fee at all. It's going to make sure to ask you for the audit or financial review if you need one. It's going to ask you to attach the 990, 990EZ, 990PF if you're filing one. It's going to ask you for the right stuff as long as you plug in the right information up there at the beginning. If you don't, if you give the system bad information, it may take you down the wrong path, in which case, if we catch that, we'll send it back to you to update and correct and resubmit. No worse or different than what happens in the paper world when folks don't file everything or file some stuff but not all the stuff, or don't answer all the questions and whatnot. The other good thing is it'll yell at you if you're missing an answer you need. It won't let you submit it without it. So it'll make sure that you got every question answered as best as a machine can do that. If you're receiving less than $25,000 a year, it's going to take you down the path of exempt organization fundraising notice form. If you're 25 or up, it's going to take you down the path of your annual update of registration or the full registration if you're a first-time filer. So if you're exempt and you got to give us a 990 every year, still send it to us by email. If you're changing a name, send us that name change documentation outside the system still. If you're submitting annual registrations for multiple years and you owe a late fee, only pay the late fee once. You only owe one late fee. The system may try to get you for a late fee for every annual filing you're submitting. In that case, if you've already paid the late fee, there's a way to ask for a late fee waiver on the form. And in that case, you're not really asking for leniency on the late fee. You're just telling us, hey, I already paid the late fee. Please don't make me pay it again. And we'll review that and send it. If you paid the late fee and it's the right amount, send it back to you and not make you double pay the late fee. So on to what we need every time you file. And we're going to move through these a little quicker here. Again, if you're using the online system, it's going to ask you for all this stuff the first time you file. And it's going to have you attach documents in certain areas to correspond to what you need here. The full registration. So we're talking about an organization that receives $25,000 or more in a fiscal year. If it's filing for the first time, it has to give us these things. It's a registration statement, copy of the organization's articles of incorporation or other governing instruments, such as a bylaws or charter, IRS tax documentation confirming your tax exempt status. Normally, it's your IRS tax determination letter that tells you you're a 501c3. That's usually if you have some federal income tax exemption, but we do have other 501c3s that still solicit charitable contributions. So there are some, 501c4, 6s, 8s that have to file. They may not have become a 501c3 public charity in the eyes of the IRS, but they still do some charitable fundraising. So any documentation that confirms that tax status is what you give us if you were in that place. Signed copy of the IRS Form 990 or 990EZ. When we say signed copy, we mean signed by an officer of the organization, or if it was e-filed with the IRS, you can send us a copy of your e-file signature authorization page along with the 990 that was e-filed so that we know it's a signed copy. So it's either got a hand-signed signature in the designated spot on the 990, 990EZ, or it has an e-file signature authorization page along with the electronically filed 990, 990EZ. and so on. If you don't file a 990 or 990 EZ, or I should even add a 990 PF here, there's a state form that you'd have to file if you're over $25,000 per year in charitable contributions, and that's the state form COF 85, and it's kind of a combination of page 9 of a 990 and page 2 of a 990 EZ. It's meant to serve as some type of full accounting for the charity in lieu of having a 990 or 990 EZ or 990 PF. The other thing required, list of names and addresses of the board of directors. What does that mean? Well, if the board of director, if the director, trustee, etc., can be found at the organization's address, then you can give us the board member's name and the organization's address. You don't have to give us an address separate of the organization, as long as that board member can be contacted through the organization's address. You may be required to submit these additional items. So those other things we talked about, you're giving us every time. Some of these things here are maybe yes, maybe no. This first one here is a threshold-based filing, the auditor financial review. If your organization's receiving contributions of at least $300,000, but less than $750,000, a financial review performed by an independent certified public accountant must be submitted as part of your registration. If your organization receives contributions of $750,000 or more, it must submit an audit performed by an independent certified public accountant as part of its registration annually for that fiscal year where you're over. So if the organization's always over, should already be in the habit of doing the audit or financial review if you're in these areas. And again, we're talking about contributions. We're talking about the income from charitable contributions. We're talking about the income from fundraising events, charitable gaming. That income is what's being used to calculate charitable contributions. And that we're not talking about total revenue for these thresholds. A lot of organizations will try to, they'll pay fees, and we'll talk about fees in a second down there at the bottom, but they'll base all their filings off of total revenue. That's not what the filings are based off. They're based off of charitable contributions as they're defined in the Maryland Solicitations Act. You have copies of contracts with professional solicitors or fundraising councils, more than one each, whatever it is. You file copies of those with us. If you're affiliated with a state agency, you note that on your form. And if you're over $750,000, you have to do something called an agreed upon procedures report. And you pay a registration fee if you're receiving $25,000 or more in charitable contributions. The fee ranges from $50 to $300 annually. And again, it's based on contributions. It's not based on total revenue. Total revenue is a different measurement, a different number than what we're counting as charitable contributions. If the organization's under $25,000, but it uses a professional solicitor, it will have to pay a $50 registration fee and file the full registration. Can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've seen that scenario play out in my time here. So not a usual scenario we run into, but it has happened. Annually, it's going to look very familiar to what you saw 2 slides ago. Very similar. Instead of the initial registration form, you file the annual registration form. Still give us a 990, 990 EZ. If you don't have one of those, you give our 990 PF. If you don't have one of them, you give us a COF 85. Still giving us that list of board of directors. And again, names and addresses. And again, address could be that of the organization. It doesn't have to be a separate address if we can find you there at the organization's address. And if the organization's updated its articles of incorporation or bylaws, send us a copy of that amended governing document. Things that may be required annually, same as 2 pages ago, right? Audit or financial review if you're required, if you're at that threshold. Copy of fundraising agreements if you have any, that's affiliated with a state agency, which is different than having, getting grant money doesn't make you affiliated per se. It's a very specific purpose that's defined in the regulations as to what it means to be affiliated with a state agency. Also, again, registration fee, $50 to $300 based on charitable contributions received. And again, the online system, if you're filing online, you're just kind of notice this stuff as a part of filling out the online form, you're going to answer the initial questions. It's going to know, oh, 500,000, 550,000 in contributions. It's going to know to ask you for a financial review. It's going to know your registration fees, $300. It's going to ask you for all the things you need based on what you're providing up front there on the online form. So as long as you plug in that initial data, the form is just going to ask you for the stuff because it knows what is due. If you're under $300,000 in contributions and you answer those, plug in those numbers from the 990 or 990 EZ, 990 PF correctly, it's not going to ask you for a financial review or audit. It's not going to ask you for a greater registration fee than you owe. So the online form is really built, I believe the term they used is dynamic. If you're in IT, you probably have a better idea of the use if I'm using that right than me. But by kind of a dynamic form, it grows with you as you answer the questions based on the answers to those questions, and hopes to get you across the line the first time with everything you need. If you're under $25,000 a year in charitable contributions, you're going to send in different stuff. Now, again, the online form is going to know that. If you fill out a 990, but your contributions are under 25,000, it's not going to try to take you to the route of the full registration and make you pay the registration fee. It's going to know you're under 25,000, and it's going to take you through the route of filing an exempt organization fundraising notice. In the paper world, it's a distinctly different form, and a lot of times we get forms intermingled. Like I said, for folks that file paper, doing your best to do it. The online system will navigate you here automatically based on your answers to those few initial questions. If it notices and detects you're under 25,000, we'll walk you to the route of the exempt organization fundraising notice form. Why exempt organization fundraising notice form? Well, if you're under $25,000 a year, you don't have to do the full registration. However, you have to give us a fundraising notice form, hence the exempt organization fundraising notice form. And it's going to ask for a little different information than an annual registration form will ask, and it's not going to ask you to attach a 990 or 990 EZ if you don't file one, and it's not going to make you do a COF 85 if you don't have a 990 or 990 EZ or 990 PF. It's not going to ask you to attach anything. It's just going to ask for charitable contributions for the year that's being reported rather than a full accounting if you're under $25,000 a year. In this case, you'll fill out the form. If you're doing it online, you'll just fill out the exempt fundraising notice form that's online, attach a copy of your IRS tax determination letter. If you have a 990, 990 EZ, 990 PF, great. It'll ask you to attach it. And if you don't, it's not going to make you do the COF 85. If you're under 25,000 a year, you're not going to have to do the full accounting if you don't already have the 990, 990 EZ, or 990 PF. Annually, if you're under 25,000 a year, you're going to continue to file the exempt organization fundraising notice. If you have a 990, 990 EZ, fantastic, you'll attach it. If you don't, it's not going to ask you for it. And you don't have to send a 990N. We don't need your 990N. And again, if you're using the online system every year, it's going to know. $1,000 a year in contributions, it's going to take you the other way. It's going to organization over 25,000, so it's going to know difference based on those initial answers. So as long as you're under 25,000 a year in contributions, you're going to keep filing exempt organization fundraising notices with us. Don't think I mentioned it on the prior page up here, but worth mentioning here. And for any filing, the organization's registration is current, where it's filing its exempt organization fundraising notices every year. The next filing or annual registration is due 10.5 months after your fiscal year ends. So you don't have to ask us for the extension. We automatically grant the extension for registration to 10.5 months after your fiscal year. And so if you're a calendar year organization, your fiscal year runs January to December, you're going to be due to us November 15th every year. Mentioned earlier some possible exemptions from registration. Some reasons you could be exempt: religious organization. So you're preaching, teaching religion, moral and ethical aspects of a particular faith. There are definitions in the Code of Maryland regulations that talk about what it takes to be considered a religious organization. Most charity work is steeped in religion. Choose your religion. It's steeped in religion, right? Helping those that need help, helping those that are disadvantaged. But in terms of what it is to be exempt because you're a religious organization, it's usually dealing with the teaching and spreading the word of a particular religion, not so much the charitable work that may be steeped into religion, but just the teaching of it itself. And again, exact definitions of the regulations. An organization that solicits only its membership. There's a definition of the term member in the Code of Maryland regulations, and basically you have to get some bona fide right, privilege, standing, honor, whatever it is, and have the ability to vote, elect officers, or hold office, some combination of that in order to be considered a member. You can't just, if you get a donation from somebody and they become a member just because they made a donation, that's not a member in the sense that you could say you only solicit your membership. An organization that receives only contributions from for-profits and private foundations. So if you're a charitable organization, the only contributions you get are from entities that the Internal Revenue Service considers a private foundation or a for-profit corporation, you could be exempt. If you get any donations from anything outside of that, any charitable contributions outside of those two types of entities, and you're required to register. So it's not that money from those things doesn't count as a contribution, it's a contribution, but if you're only getting contributions from those places, you wouldn't have to register. Parent-teacher organizations or youth sports organizations that receive less than $25,000 a year in charitable contributions don't have to give us anything. They don't even have to do the exempt filer form, the exempt organization fundraising notice form we talked about a couple slides ago. And public safety organizations that solicit public safety contributions only. We talked about that a tad earlier. Think of your local volunteer fire company. If the only thing they're raising money for is to support the fire company and its firefighters and its equipment and maintaining the firehouse and training and all the things related to being a firefighter and running the firehouse, then that's a public safety organization. If a public safety organization though solicits for things that are charitable in general and not just public safety related, then they are a charity and they'd have to register. So you might see some, again, thinking of that as the easy example that folks will understand. You might see some volunteer fire departments registered with us, and that's probably because they do fundraising outside of just the purpose of the department itself, some other public good. So those are the exemptions from registration. Again, if it's under 25,000, exempt organization fundraising notice form. If you're over 25,000 or more, you're going to do the initial registration, and then you're going to file annual updates of that registration annually. And 10.5 months after the fiscal year ends, that's when it's due. Most common things we see that lead to registrations not being accepted the first time, whether it's quite frankly paper or online. In this case, submitting unsigned 990s and unsigned registration forms. Can't submit an unsigned registration form online, but you can still attach an unsigned 990. Entering the incorrect fiscal year that's being reported. If your fiscal year ends in December and you're reporting the fiscal year that ended December 31st, 2023, you need to make sure you note that year on the form. The biggest mistake people make when they're noting their fiscal year is they just write today's date on there. They don't actually select the fiscal year that's being reported. They just tick today, and we'll know what day it is because you're going to sign and date the annual registration form. Whether it's online or on paper that you've submitted, it should be signed and dated. So we don't need to know what day you signed it. We need to know, we need you to confirm what fiscal year you're signing for and signing to submit to us. Incorrectly entering the numbers for the 990 in an online form. For example, on the full 990, we're asking for numbers off of pages 9 and 10. People, as long as you plug in the right numbers from those lines on your 990, it'll get you to the right spot, and it'll calculate contributions correctly, make sure you pay the right fee, make sure you get the auditor review if it's needed. So just make sure you're double checking the lines you're entering, make sure you're entering the right numbers. Easy to make a typo, just double check it. Paper applications, see a lot of common errors. mostly not submitting all the required documentation, or not paying the right fee, or not submitting the auditor review when it's required, and because the organization is not calculating contributions correctly, and also not providing, I really hammered that point home earlier about email addresses, but not providing email addresses and phone numbers on registration forms. We're going to reach out to you by email primarily. We got a good phone number, we might be able to give you a quick call. Make sure it's a phone number and email, again, that somebody's actually answering, paying attention to, and responding to. Doesn't do much good if we're trying to get a hold of you and it's not a good number. Again, I realize that sounds obvious. You're here, you're probably doing that, but I want to point that out because we see it so often where it's just a number that doesn't work anymore, or it's a generic email address that nobody's answering, or it's an email address that we're given on the form every year and the person's not even with the charity anymore, and we keep getting that email address. And if I see a couple chuckles, you'd be surprised at how we run into that sometimes. Just give us a current email, phone number. Some things to think about. It says recent changes. They're not as recent as they used to be. We automatically extend your registration now to 10.5 months. It used to be you had 6 months to file and you had to request extensions. We don't make you request extensions anymore. We just give you the extension automatically. So if you hit that registration deadline of 6 months and everything's not done yet, don't panic. You don't even need to tell us. As long as you're current, you're automatically getting that extension for your registration to 10.5 months after the fiscal year ends. One thing I did want to note, I think it's good to note here too, is with regards to late fees, if you're over $25,000 a year and you're filing the full annual registration, the late fee doesn't start until you're 60 days late. So in that example I gave earlier, if you're a fiscal year organization, your year ends December 31st annually, you're due to us November 15th, you don't get a late fee until 60 days after that. One of the other, again, I sound like I'm plugging the online system. Apologies if it sounds that way, but the good thing about the online system is it's not going to make you pay a late fee if you don't know it. A lot of folks try to pay us late fees when they're 2 days late. You don't need to. You got a 60-day window before you get pinged with a late fee. So we have folks that sometimes are overpaying us, and we don't want your money if you don't know it. And as long as we catch it, we'll get it refunded to you, but why go through that process if we don't have to? So late fees 60 days after the filing deadline. And again, extensions are automatic. So really, if you think about it in the big picture, you got 12.5 months after your fiscal year ends before you get a late fee. Get that annual registration done in that time. We don't like late fees as much as you don't like having to pay them. Please don't make us assess them. Under the law, it's $25 a month after that 60-day window, and it's each month or part thereof. So if you hit the first day of the next month, it's $25 more. So take care of that in the allotted time or within that extra window, so you don't get a late fee. Audit thresholds used to be $500,000, it's $750 now. Review used to be $200, it's $300,000 now in contributions. We used to require our board of directors home addresses, alternative addresses. Not a requirement anymore. You're still going to give us the address, but it can be the address of the organization. And if you're filling out the online form, it's just going to ask you, is the board member's address the same as the organization? You can just click the yes button. You don't have to type out the address for everybody. You just click yes if that answer is the correct answer. So just some resources to think about here. These are all on our charity home page too. If you scroll down a little bit to the If You Are a Charity section, Community Law Center, Maryland Association of Nonprofit Organizations, Maryland Nonprofit Development Center, all really good resources, especially for small and growing nonprofits. And you get a lot of helpful information, tools, and maybe even some legal counsel from those folks. Also your local bar association, if you're looking for an attorney, you can go through your local bar organization and maybe find one that specializes in business or nonprofits. So things to think about. Here's our contact information. I'm going to keep this page up even as we move on to questions here, just so folks can have this contact information. Even if we don't get you here, on this call, or you think about the question after, or you really just don't want to ask in front of everybody, you can call us or email us offline, and we'll always respond and give us a day or two to respond. Some days we get a lot of emails, some days it's more quiet, and can't always tell which one it's going to be when it happens. So, and before we move on to the question and answer, just concluding presentation here, you know, again, if you're unsure, if your charity's behind, you need to know what to do to get current, contact us, reach out to us. We love to see you succeed. We love to see you current and compliant. It's no fun chasing charities that are out of compliance, and it's no fun being a charity chased by us that's out of compliance. So to the extent we can keep you current, we want to do that. And so if you have questions on how to make that happen, let us know, and or how to get compliant, or if you're compliant, you're not sure what's due, when it's due next, or you're getting stuck in the online system, reach out. And if you're stuck in the online system, take a peek at those user guides too. A lot of times they can help you get through what you're working on. And again, just today's presentation is for informational purposes only, not intended to be legal advice. The recording of this town hall should get posted on the charity page of our website within the next week or so. It should be posted online. So if you miss something here, you can always go back and rewatch it, or if you just want to rewatch it or share a link with anybody, you know, you can send them to our website. It'll pop up there in about a week or so's time, hopefully sooner, but if not, at least within a week or so of this recording occurring. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Really appreciate that you're here today, and we'll stay on for questions and answers here in a second. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you.